I introduced myself. I went through all these things. I showed him the pleadings. I showed him the Supreme Court case that had his name on it. I showed him all the documents we had filed. I took him through the litigation. He sat passively with an absolutely blank look. It's what the doctors call no affect. No look in his eyes. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. I paused. I didn't know what to do. I pulled out the letter from his wife. I thought this might be a breakthrough. He obviously recognized her handwriting. He read it with interest, but he didn't react to it. I gathered up all my stuff. I put it all away. I said, Mom, dude, let's start something different here. And I told him the story that I just told you. I told him I brought his wife to Sydney. You have to understand that my client was a rendition case. He had been rendered by the United States to Egypt. I will spare you what happened to him in Egypt, but if you knew it, there would be no question about whether this constitutes torture. He had been tortured horribly. And one of the things that the Egyptian interrogators had told him is that his wife was dead. His family was lost to him. He would live the rest of his life in Egypt. And that his wife had been killed. He read the letter. I put it all away. I said, I want to share with you something. I brought Maha from Sydney to Chicago. And she told me some things because we knew this would happen. And I told him where they went on their first date. And he put his hands in front of him like this. And then I told him what the first little trinket was that he gave to Maha while they were dating. And then I told him who his children were with while they sat at their son's bedside. And he looked at me, and then he looked down, and he started to sob, and he started to cry. And he looked back up at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, we have so much work to do. And that's when I knew I had a client. And that's when I knew I had a human being. The detention policy was extremely successful if the objective was to produce a sense of despair. And Mamdouh Habib had given up hope. What we know from the American experience, what we know from the experience of U.S. soldiers, particularly in Korea, where 40% of American soldiers did not come home from the Korean camps, 40%, is the ones who didn't come back were the ones who had given up hope. They literally turned their back on the world. They stopped eating. They stopped communicating. They stopped interacting. And they just withered and died. The most precious commodity in any prison is not an extra half hour of sunlight or exercise. It's not a pack of cigarettes. It is hope. The commodity that you cannot extinguish in a prisoner is the hope that they will see, touch their family again. And Mamdouh had given up hope. We spent the rest of that visit, 3 or 4 days, talking about what had happened to him in Egypt. Why do we want to know what happened to Egypt? Because while I was there, someone, I don't know who, anonymously, sent me an email indicating that the Egyptian government was requesting that prisoners of theirs, nationals of theirs, be returned to their country. And as I say, Mamdouh had been born in Egypt. Well, he had been rendered to Egypt and been tortured there horribly. And I wanted to see to it that he not be sent back to Egypt. And so we spent all the time talking about what happened to him there. And when I got back to the United States, the day before Thanksgiving, 2004, I wrote a motion to prevent his transfer, saying that that would violate the Convention Against Torture. Now, obviously, you can't send a person to a place that they've been tortured. That's the best evidence that they'll be tortured again. And the Convention Against Torture prevents us from sending a person to a place where they're likely to be tortured. And for the longest time, that document, of course, was filed under seal, as everything in this litigation has to be. And for the longest time, it didn't become public, and I couldn't understand what was taking so long. Usually it takes about a week, 10 days for this. All through the rest of November and all of December, it didn't get cleared. And finally, in early January, I called the court security office and I said, look, enough is enough. If you don't clear this document, I'm going to go to court and file a motion and ask that it be cleared for public filing. And at 4 o'clock that afternoon, I got an email saying the document is cleared for filing, you can file it. And then it was an account of what had happened to Mamdouh Habib. A detailed account. and he saw and he was able to tell who it was that rendered him. Because though he was blindfolded when he was rendered, when they put it on, instinctively, when they put the blindfold on, because someone brought something up to his eyes, he closed his eyes. He clenched his eyes closed like this. And then when he opened his eyes, it raised the blindfold up, and so he could see out of the bottom. And he saw the people that were taking off his clothes and putting him in different clothes to render him from Pakistan to Egypt. And he saw one who had a flag tattooed on his wrist. And the pole of the flag was on his thumb, and the rest of it was furled across the top of his wrist. And he saw another, and they spoke with unaccented American English, and they wore black shirts and white khakis. And he saw another who had a colorful dagger on his forearm, and he's able to describe that to me, and I put that all in those pleadings. It just so happened, in one of those coincidences that sometime mark litigation, and for which you later get identified as a good lawyer, but really have nothing to do with skills, and we filed that document. I filed it publicly the moment they said you could, and as soon as it was filed, 15 minutes after it was filed, I emailed it to Dana Priest of the Washington Post. And the next morning, there was a front page article that ran of the Washington Post describing what had happened to this person that we rendered and the U.S. involvement in that. And just coincidentally, that was the day that Attorney General, White House counsel, now Attorney General Gonzalez, was testifying at his confirmation hearings at the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois held up a copy of the Washington Post with Dana Priest's front page article saying, look at this. Look what we are doing. Look what we've done to this person. If this is true, Judge Gonzalez, if this is true, this is illegal, isn't it? And because they had no prior notice of this, because they didn't see this coming, he was not prepared for that question. And he said, yes, if that's true, what we did with that person, as I understand it, and then the lights dimmed. If that's true, then what we did to that person is illegal. And that was a Thursday. And that shined a national spotlight on that person, on one detainee and the treatment of one prisoner. And they had made the most fantastic, aggressive allegations about what Mamdouh had supposedly done. And he was a person who, by the breakdown that Ambassador Prosper gives, was in Category 1. And that was Thursday. And on Tuesday morning, I got a phone call from the Australian embassy saying, Mamdouh is going to be released. And when he is released, will you fly home with him? And later that morning, the Defense Department announced that Mamdouh was going to be released.